Hi there and welcome to my 12th tutorial on Java, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about classes. This is my introduction tutorial to classes, as the topic of the classes is very vast. So I have to separate the videos to a couple of parts which will cover different aspects of object-oriented programming. Classes are part of object-oriented programming, and we have different aspects like polymorphism, inheritance, and so on. So this will be covered in future tutorials, not maybe in the sequence, but everything will be covered in time and explain to you how to use those concepts of object-oriented programming. So today just the introduction of how to create a simple class, how to create a simple object, and how to use them, how you can use them, how to create them, and so on. So this is the simple introduction today. You can notice from the beginning of my tutorials that we always use the class, which is a public class. Of course we can have only one public class in the file, because the public class is created with the file. When you create a file, we always created a public class. So today we will create normal classes. You can create your classes inside this public class, but we will create outside, which will make less errors with the compiler and stuff like this. For some reason I prefer to create them outside for now. So for just the ease, for the sake of ease, let's say, I will just create them outside. You can create them inside, it's pretty much valid, but sometimes you may get some mistakes and you have to create a constructors and stuff like this to use them, and that's pretty much rubbish. I just want to start from the from the very basic, and then I'll show you the constructor in this tutorial as well. So you can start pretty much here or here, it depends on you. I will do it outside, it's for the sake of, as I said, it's easier. So to create a class we will simply use the class keyword. Pretty simple to remember. You don't have to add public, it's one public class as I said. Then you have a name, so for example calc, like this, and you open and close curly brackets. That's pretty much your class. So there's nothing really mysterious about classes. This is pretty much simple as it is, isn't it? And inside what you put is pretty much the same thing you've done in here. So you can put a method or a function inside the class, which you have like here, and then inside this method you can simply put statements. For example, variables. You can put arrays. You can put loops and if statement and so on. So this is how the class looks like. You've built your function in here a couple of times through previous tutorials. Now you will learn how to create the class from the beginning. So when you add a variable to the class variable, so this one, if you had added to this public class, it will be here outside of the main in this scope. You can do this in the public function class. You can do this in public class. You can also add the variables here, and the same goes in here. You can add just variables here outside of the functions, and those will be pretty much valid. So those variables are you can create them like normal ways. Integer, for example, int number equals 10 or doesn't even equal anything, just simply create a variable. But my teachers always shown me to create most of the codes I have and learn from is always showing how to create variables and stuff like this with the public scope or private scope. So you include the scopes. Now with this, the object will be able to access it or not. So for example, if you create a private variable like an int, private int, the object will not be able to change this variable. So if you create an object in this function, which is main function, the object will not be able to access this variable at all. So you cannot change, you cannot print probably as well. I haven't tried actually, but it's private, and it should be available only for this class. Same goes for this one. And public is basically available for object, and object can use it or probably even change its value. So the scope is also important. I'll use some private variables, int num1, let's say, and num2, and don't give it any value. And then I will create a function, which is a public function, and let's say void. And sometimes you will have to create a static function, public static void. In this case, I may have to create a static function, but we will see if I don't get any errors for doing this. And I will, oh, I haven't got the name, calculate, for example. So if I don't get any errors with the runtime or something like this, when the compiler, when I run the bug, then I will leave it like this. But if I don't, I will just simply add a static. It will solve everything, probably. So now those two doesn't have anything, but I can use them in this function because they are for this class. So I don't have to say, for example, pass those variables in here. I can simply use them. So for example, I can say number1 is equal to is equal to, let's say, 10, and num2 is equal to 20, and I will simply add them now. So number1 is equal to num1 plus num2. So as you can see, it doesn't show me any errors, even if this is private, and I don't have to pass any values. I don't have to pass this. I don't have to pass those two to be able to use them. You can also repeat you can also do the same process in here. So if you create a variable like this one in this public class, you can also use those variables in pretty much any function you have. You can have another function in here, for example, and you can use this variable to I don't know, assign some stuff to it or stuff like this, and then pass it maybe to this function main, return it maybe, and carry on with the calculation. So you can pretty much do this in this function, in this class as well. So basically this is how this class will look like. I pretty much finished it. It's quite simple, and one method, two variables, pretty much simple class. And now the main function is the one that starts the program. So basically I have to call my object. I create my object in my main, and when you create your object, you have to state your class which you use, and then you create object and then create instance object of this class. So for example, I have a class which is calc, then I have a name of the object, which is, for example, object obj. You can like this, do it like this, and then equals new calc. So that's a new object. Now I have new object. I can pretty much because I have one function, I can use this function. It's pretty much, the object pretty much works on the pretty much same basis as string. It's not the same as string, but works on the pretty much similar basis, because when you hit the dots, when you press the dots after the object's name, you also have those methods and variables, if any, available for the object, which you can use. Like with the string, you have those methods which you can use, and you can just choose one method and then do some kind of stuff with this string. Now object doesn't have all those methods. It has a couple of them, as you can see. It has a couple of them. As you can see also, I cannot see those variables in my list. Those variables are not existent. So basically those are private and I cannot even see them, so I cannot use them. If I were to type num1 and, for example, equal to 10, that wouldn't be valid. And as you can see, there's a couple of those functions you can use, or methods, and those are pretty much always the same here, this list. When you create an object, it's pretty much all the time there. So for example, things like to string, wait, and stuff like this, the most useful one I would say is to string, right? But there is also my methods I created in the class, and I can use this method to print out something, because I haven't set the print statement. Therefore I will just do it right now. out.print and print number 1. So basically this is how you will use your object. I have an object dot and I have a method which I created in the class. Now when I run this, you will just simply see output of the calculation, which is 30. 10 plus 20, it's simply 30 as the calculation. Pretty simple use with one function and so on. Of course you can add more functions. You can add another function. You can add 10 functions. Whatever you want you can do pretty much with it. You can add more variables and strings as well, not just numeric type. And you can create more objects. It's not limited to just one object of the same class. You can create different numbers of objects. For example, 10 objects of the same class. It's not limited to just one. So you have to remember that. You can create 10, 20, probably infinite number of objects of the same class, instances of the same class. And basically that's how you create your class and object and how you use it. Of course you can add another thing, which is a constructor. A constructor is something that will depend on the constructor, but the constructor most of the time will ask you to, when you create an object, to pass the values in. So for example, when I create a constructor, I create this object, I will have to specify the values or value which will be passed to this constructor and those variables, for example, or different variables, whatever it is. Then those variables will have the value from the start, which is probably, well, you can specify it here by the user or by yourself by hard values. And that's how the constructor will look like now. So you simply write the name of your class followed by a simple bracket without nothing. This one is a empty constructor. This one doesn't have any arguments. So you will do nothing. And pretty much this doesn't change anything. And this constructor is simply a default constructor, doesn't do anything. But if I say int n and int y, let's say something like this, I have two arguments now which are passed to this constructor, and as you can see, this one is wrong now. I cannot create my object because I didn't pass the values. So now I would have to pass two values of integer type, not string nor something else. It has to be an integer type as it's specified here. And when I create the objects, those two values are passed here. Now I can use those two variables which has those two values to assign them onto my variables which I have here, for example. So instead of doing this, I can simply say num1 equals n and num2 equals y, or the other way around. So basically that's how you can assign values to the private variables which you have in here. You don't have to make them public. You can simply use a constructor which will assign automatically with each and every object you create. Each time you create a new object, you will also have to specify those values. As I said, you don't have to specify the hard values. You can you can pass variables. You can also ask user for input, store it in a variable, and then pass the variable. So it's not limited to just a hard value. And when I run this now, I should get 6, which I get, which is simple calculation of those two. And with the strings, let me just show you with the strings. So, and also, of course, when you have your what was it? When you have your arguments here, it's not limited to just integer type. You can do the same thing you're doing with functions. You can pass you can pass those different types. So for example, you can have a string in here as well. You can have a Boolean types, you can have characters, pretty much anything you have with the normal variables. So for example, string, I will have sorry about that, quite ill. And let's say the string will be NA, just to make it short. And I will create a string here, which is private string, let's say name, and don't give it any value. I will just what plus what plus name. Okay. So basically I will pass the name as well. So now I say name equals to NA, and now I will be asked to add 3 different inputs to my newly created object. So I have another colon, and this time I have to specify the string, which is, for example, like this. And again, this doesn't change. As you can see, I can change only those couple of things. I don't have to change here anything. I just change stuff in the class, and it's pretty much useful this way, because this class, this object, will contain all those informations. So now if I want to print out, if I can, if I want to print out, for example, variable which is public, I can do this, and it will print out the variable which is public, I don't have one, with the value it currently has. So it's pretty much useful to use objects in the future and with the most concept of programming. So now let's run this, and it will display 6 and dark. So pretty simple use of classes this is, and this is pretty simple use of the constructor, and this is the pretty much basic of the tutorial which I'm presenting you today. And as I said, this is just an introduction. Of course, you can create more functions. As I said, you can create more objects. It's not limited to just one, and probably you can create more variables, which is public. You can create public variables. Play around with this, just practice. Then later on, you will move on to different concepts of object-oriented programming. And that's pretty much it about this tutorial. And visit my webpage and YouTube channel for more tutorials. If you like my videos, subscribe on the channel, on my videos. There's still more tutorials to come on Java, and there's loads of tutorials about different type of programming like C++, even HTML and scripts. There's some stuff on Pep 8 if you are interested, which is a virtual machine, something like this. So even something on maths you can find on my webpage, so it's worth visiting. And pretty much all my tutorials are there, which are written. So those are the most informative tutorials, I would say, because they're written and you have information out there I cannot present in videos sometimes. And I will see you in my next tutorial. Simply bye.